but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no was going to undo sort of everything. Like, if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're
through crypto
ransomware, yes, yes, 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer to peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams, Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like you put $100,000 into this little mixer and then it sends $100,000 out later and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cap. And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto,
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
the son of Harvard lawyers, we just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that, bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. You know, I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win. It means playing League of Legends while an investor goes, like at the time that was seen as this charming, like genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually. Okay.
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild too. The whole scene was wild.
Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store offering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on...
That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that we're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors because it's like if I give money to you to give, I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world, you know, and that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. Might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys or money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, You have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He was touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age. I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from. The average person service that said, you cannot move. Like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? Success. 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this or system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Wow.
Even though they were never supposed to be able to. Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to, how you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. TT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. Some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and Vic, he's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. We can expose. But like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about this left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
This stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But there was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like crypto is. Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So like look at the Turkish lira. Abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. Her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this. So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to it was the terms of I'll have to my feeling is offshore entities should not be they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore I don't know. I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the shocking thing, and I think that shows if you're running a shady empire, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get into something like that? Why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. This is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. There were things that were coming out, questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. Good person in the space, to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But
FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party regulators when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations. How could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? What could they have possibly done to make it easy?
Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's this is the tactic of these offshore companies is you put the annoying. So
we don't need that.
The famous example is Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded. He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, I can't lose. It's almost, betting on the house. And it's sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly some companies, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, 100x leverage really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange, launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. Everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey. But ultimately, the outcome of that is I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me. Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while, this Coinbase, it seems like they're legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So
there.
is the lure is how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. Fight, like, one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank to their other friends, they're all saying it's okay, let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had myself, they kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. There were some margin trading accounts, and I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted, a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about, and it just was kind of, I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was trying to break down these topics. I was like, I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. Of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like, there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative from the arms of one huckster to another. Like, it's just like it's almost to something worse. There are or something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time, I watched her as she's gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, you got to get the surgery. This ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, CZ has connections to China. Maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal. But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is a lot of people had...
It was 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that. Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to... He's doing interviews with everything. I don't have access to the book. I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time...
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was saying FTX US is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he launched LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. He was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then the problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral balances, but oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. It's you find not having sort of like it's maybe not big enough. They're good people. A lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. Sort of this is a fraud because no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense. But he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I investment funds, they invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. He launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money and we're going to do $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong too. You can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges. Through mixers. It's just sort of
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I study, the guy who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode, and he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like, there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went
on your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange. They have a bank and they work with that bank. Then they exchange located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your
why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became if you want to store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job, like be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just gotten
away with it.
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos and go start trading with it. Unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it. And that's where the disaster started.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this. If it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. Act that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it. Labeled the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured, changed that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
And that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. And then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX do, like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. They're basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like, it had gotten, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon dropshipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady.